Foreword of A Tree with a Bird in It. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Tree with a Bird in It, a symposium of contemporary American poets on being shown a pear tree on which sat a grackle, by Margaret Widdemer. Dedication and Foreword. This is dedicated with my forgiveness in advance to the poets parodied in this book and the poets not parodied in this book. Foreword by the collator. A little while since, I had the fortune to live in a house outside of whose windows there grew a pear tree. On the branches of this tree lived a green bird of indeterminate nature. I do not know what his real name was, but the name, to quote our great exemplar Lewis Carroll, by which his name was called, was the grackle. He seemed perfectly willing to be addressed thus, and accordingly was. Aside from watching the pear tree and the grackle, my other principal occupation that winter was watching the Poetry Society of America now and then at its monthly meetings. It occurred to me finally to invite such members of it as cared to come, following many good examples, to an outdoor symposium under the tree. The result follows. Margaret Widdemer. P.S. The tree died. End of foreword.
Resignation by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Jessie B. Rittenhouse. Read for LibriVox.org. She steps brightly forward with an air of soprano introduction. I look from out my window, beloved, and I see a bird upon a pear bough. But what is that to me? Because the thought comes icy. That bird you never knew. It's not your bird or pear tree, and what is it to you? End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Bird with the Woe by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Edwin Markham. Read for LibriVox.org by Joanna Michael Hoyt. Edwin Markham, who, though he had to lay a cornerstone, unveil a bust of somebody, give 2 lectures, and write encouraging introductions to the works of 5 young poets before catching the 3:10 for Staten Island, offered his reaction in a benevolent and unhurried manner. The Bird with the Woe. Poets to men a curious sight afford, still they will sing, though all around are bored. But this wise grackle does a kinder thing, silent he's bored while all around him sing. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Unity of Oneness by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Widdemer. Read for LibriVox.org by MLeigh. Prefaced by a short baritone talk on Chinese architecture. Celia, have you been to China? There upon a mystic tree sits a bird who murmurs Chinese of the me in thee. 'Neath that tree of willow pattern, twice 7,000 scornful go, paraphrasers and translators of the long-deceased Li Po. Chinese feelings swift discerning, without all this time and fuss, let us eat that bird, thus learning of the hymn in us. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Oisery by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Amy Lowell, read for LibriVox.org by Shiu. Glunk! I tossed my heels up to my head. That was a bird I heard say glunk, as I walked statelily through my extensive, expensive English country estate. In a pink brocade with silver buttons, a purple passementerie cut with panniers, a train, and faced with watered silk. But it is dead now. The bird, probably putrescent and green. I scrabble my toes. Glunk! End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Imre Swayze by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Edgar Lee Masters. Read for LibriVox.org by Phil Schempf. Making a statement which you may take or leave, but convincing you entirely. I was a shock-headed boy bringing in the laundry. Why did I try for that damn bird anyway? I suppose I had been in the habit of aiming for the pears, but I chucked a stone anyhow, and it ricocheted and hit my head, and as it hadn't any brains inside, the stone busted it, and there I was dead. And dead with me were all the improper things I'd got out of the servants about their employers bringing in the laundry. But the grackle sings on. Sing forever, O grackle. I died, knowing lots of things you don't know. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. Rambuncto by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Edwin Arlington Robinson. Read for LibriVox.org by Phil Schempf. He mutters wearily in an undertone. Well, they're quite dead, Rambuncto. Thoroughly dead. It was a natural thing enough. My eyes stared baffled down the forest aisles, brown and green, not learning what the marks were. Still, who learns? Not I, who stooped and picked the things that day. Scarlet and gold and smooth, friend, smooth enough. And she's in a vault now, old Jane Fotheringham, my mother-in-law, and my wife's 7 aunts, and that cursed bird that used to sit and croak upon their pear-tree. They threw scraps to him. My wife, too. Lord, that was a curious thing, because I don't like mushrooms much, I said, and they ate all I picked, and then they died. But, well, who knows it isn't better that way. It's quieter at least. Rambuncto, friend, why, you're not going. Well, it's a stupid year, and the world's very useless. Sorry. Still the dusk in transience that I much prefer leaves place for little hope and less regret. I don't suppose he'd care to stay to dine under the circumstances. What's life for? End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Bird Misunderstood by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Robert Frost. Read for LibriVox.org by MLeigh. Rather nervously, retreating with haste in the wake of Mr. Robinson as soon as he had finished. There was a grackle sat on our old pear-tree. Don't ask me why, I never did really know. But he made my wife and me feel, for really the very first time, we were out in the actual country, hindering things to grow. It gave us rather a queer feeling to hear the grackle grackle But when it got to be winter time, he got up and went thence. And now we shall never know, though we watch the tree till April, whether his curious crying ever made song or sense. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Chicago Memories by Margaret Widdemer. Writing as Carl Sandburg. Read for LibriVox.org by Ryan Godley. Striking from time to time a few notes on a mouth organ with a wonderful effect of human brotherhood which does not quite include the East. Grackles, trees. I've been thinking about 'em all. I've been thinking they're all right. Nothing much. Gosh, nothing much against God, even. God made little apples, a hobo sang in Kankakee, shattered apples. I picked you up under a tree, red wormy apples. I ate you. That lets God out. There were 3 green birds on the tree. There were 3 wailing cats against a green dawn. Gene Fields sang, "The world is full of a number of things." Gene Fields said, "When they caught me, I was living in a tree." Gene Fields said everything in Chicago of the 80s. Now he's dead. I say things. Say 'em well, too. Gene Field. Back in the lost days. Back in the 80s. Singing. Columning. Gene Fields. Forgotten. Back in Arkansas, there was a green bird, too. I can remember how he sang. Back in the lost days. Back in the 80s. Uncle Jan Swenson under the tree chewing slowly, slowly. Memories, memories. There are only 3 trees now. No Gene. No 80s gray cats. I can feel your fur in my heart. Green grackle. I remember now. Back in the lost days, back in the 80s, the cat ate you. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Frost and Sandburg Tonight by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Edith M. Thomas, read for LibriVox.org by Victoria. Apple green bird on a wooden bow, and the brazen sound of a long, loud row, and, child, take the train, but mind what you do. Frost tonight, and Sandburg too. Then I sally forth, half wild, half cowed, till I come to the surging, impervious crowd, the wine-filled, the temperance, the sober, the pied, the poets that cover the countryside. The poets I never would meet till tonight, a gleam of their eyes in the fading light, and I took them all in, the enormous throng, and with one great bound I bolted along. If the garden had merely held birds and flowers, but I hear a voice, they have talked for hours. Frost tonight, if 'twere merely he, half wild, half cowed, I flee, I flee. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Unquiet Singer by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Charles Hanson Towne, read for LibriVox.org by Tom Merritt. Charles Hanson Towne, who rather begrudged the time he used up in going out to the suburbs. The Unquiet Singer. He had been singing, but I had not heard his voice. He had been bothering the rest with song, but I, most comfortably far within the city's stimulating jar, feeling for bus conductors and for flats, and shop girls buying too expensive hats, and silver service dinners, and various kinds of pleasant urban sinners. And riding on the subway and the L had much beside his song to hear and tell. But one day It was spring, when poets ride afield to wild poetic festivals. I, innocently making calls, was snatched by a swift motor toward his tree. Alas, but lady poets will do this to thee, if thou art decorative, witty, or a man, and heard him sing, and on the grass did bide. But my whole day was sadder for his words, and I was thinner, because, in spite of my most careful plan, I missed a very pleasant little dinner. In short, unless well cooked, I don't like birds. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
At Autumn by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Sarah Teasdale. Read for LibriVox.org. Who got Miss Rittenhouse to read it for her? I bend and watch the grackles billing, and fight with tares as I float by. Oh, be a fowl from my heart's filling, oh, be a bird, yet never fly. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Reign of by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Ezra Pound. Read for LibriVox.org by Tom Merritt. Ezra Pound, mailed disdainfully by him from anywhere but America, and read prayerfully by a committee from Chicago. Reign of, a romantic ballad from the early Basque. So then, naturally, this Count Reynov I speak of. Certainly I did not expect you would ever have heard of him. You are American poets, aren't you? That's rather awful. I am the only American poet I could ever tolerate. Well, sniff and pass. Therefore, well, I knew Reynov. My PG course at Penn, you'll remember. A little Anglo-Saxon and Basuto, but Provençal mostly. Most don't go in for that. You haven't, of course. What? No Provençal? Well, of course, I know rather more than you do. That's my specialty. But then, omnis Gallia est divisa. But no matter. Not fit, perhaps you'd say, that to be quoted before ladies. That's your rather amusing prudishness. Well, this Reynov, then, a person with a squint like a flash of square fishes, being rather worse than most of the usual literati, said, being carried off by desire of boasting, that he knew all the mid-Victorians. Et ablobos amics. He thought it was something to boast of. We'll say he said he smoked with Tennyson, and deeper pit, Pax Vobiscum, went to vespers with Adelaide Ann Proctor, helped Bob Browning elope with Elizabeth and her lapdog, said it bit him, said he was the first man Blake told all about the angels in a pear-tree at Peckham Rye. Blake drew them for him, he said. They were grackles, not angels. Blake's not a mid-Victorian, but you don't know better. So we come, being slightly irritated, to facing him down. And George Eliot, we asked lightly. Roomed with him, nodded Reynov confidently. At college, beaux amis, beaux amis. Reynov is a king to you. 3 centuries from now, you dead and messy, Men whispering insolently, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, will boast that their great-grand-uncles were kicked by me in passing. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Sighing Tree by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Margaret Widdemer. Read for LibriVox.org by Joanna Michael Hoyt. Margaret Widdemer, clutching a non-existent portiere with one hand. The Sighing Tree. The folk of the wood called me. There sits a golden bird upon your mother's pear-tree. But I never said a word. The sleepy people whispered, the bird is singing now. But I felt not then like leaving bed nor listening beneath the bough. But the wronged world beat my portals, come out or be sore oppressed. So I threw a stone at the grackle, and my throbbing heart had rest. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Ballad of Spring Chickens by Margaret Widdemer. Writing as Richard Le Gallienne. Read for LibriVox.org by Ryan Godley. Advancing with the dreamy air of there still being a yellow book. Spring comes, yet where the dream that glows? There only waves upon the lea a lonely pear bough where doth doze a bird of green, and merely he. Why weave of him our poetry? Why of a grackle need we sing? Ah, far another fowl for me. I seek spring chickens in the spring. Though May returns, and frisking shows her ankles through this white-clad tree, alas, old spring's gone with the rose. Gone is all old romance and glee. Yet still a joy remains to me. Softly our lyric lutes unstring. Far from this grackle we shall flee and seek spring chickens in the spring. Too soon youth's MSS must close. Omar, its rose be pot-pourri. What of this bird and all his woes? Catulla, I would fly to thee. Bright bird of luring lingerie, of bushy bob, of knees a swing, this golden task be mine in fee, to seek spring chickens in the spring. Envoy. Prince, let us leave this grove. Pardie, a flapper is a fairer thing. Let us fare fast where such there be, and seek spring chickens in the spring. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Oh, Bird by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Angela Morgan. Read for LibriVox.org by Joanna Michael Hoyt. Angela Morgan, carefully lifting her Greek robe off the wet grass, and patting her fillet with one white glove, recites passionately. Oh, Bird! I heard a flaming noise that screamed, man, panting, crushed, must be redeemed. Man, all the crowd of him, quiet or loud of him, men, raging souls of them, heaps of them, shoals of them, hurtling impassioned through fiery-tongued rapture, leaping for glories all avid to capture bounteous eons of star-beating bliss. I heard a voice cry, and I'm sure it said this, though the cook said the noise was a tree and a bird. But I heard. Gods, I heard. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Charnel Bird by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Conrad Aiken. Read for LibriVox.org by Liam Knowles. Creeping mysteriously out of the twilight, draped in a complex, Forslund murmurs a melodious impropriety. musing on birds and women dead eons ago. Was he not, once, this fowl, a gay bird in society? Can anyone tell? After an evening out, who can know? Perhaps Cleopatra, lush in her inadequate wrappings, lifted him once to her tatbebs. Perhaps Helen of Troy found him more live than her Paris, a bird among dead ones. Perhaps Semiramis, once, in a pink, unnameable joy. I tie my shoes politely, a salute to this bird in his pear-tree. What is a pear-tree, after all? What is a bird? What is a shoe, or a forcelet, or even a senlin? What is a what? Is there anyone who has heard? What is it crawls from the kiss-thickened Freudian darkness, amorous, cat-like? Ah, can it be a cat? I would so much rather it had been a scarlet harlot. There is so much more genuine poetry in that. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. A Young Girl to a Young Bird by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Mary Carolyn Davies. Read for LibriVox.org by Liam Knowles. Impetuously, with a floppy hat. When one is young, you know, then one can sing of anything. One is so young, so pleasurably so. How can one know? If God made little apples, or yet pears, or if God cares. You are young, maybe, grackle, that is why I want to cry. Seeing you watch the poems that I say, tonight, today. This little boy bird seems to nod to me, with sympathy. He is so young. It must be that is why, as young as I. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. The Rune of the Nude by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Marguerite Wilkinson. Read for LibriVox.org by Liam Knowles. Advancing with sedate courtesy in a long-sleeved, high-necked lecture costume. I will set my slim strong soul on this tree with no leaves upon it. I will lift up my undressed dreams to the nude and ethical sky. This bird has his feathers upon him. He shall not have even a sonnet. Until he is stripped of his last pin plume, I will sing of my mate and I. My ancestors rise from their graves to be shocked at my soul's wild climbing. They were strong, they were righteous, my ancestors, but they always kept on their clothes. My mate is the best of all mates alive. His voice is a raptured rhyming. He chants, "Come down," but it cannot come, either for him or those. My ancestors pound from their Ouija board. My mate leaps in swift indignation. I must tell the world of their wonders, but I must be strong and free. Though all sires and all mates cry out in a runic incantation, my soul shall be stripped and buttonless. It shall dwell in a naked tree. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Admiration by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Aylin Kilmer. Read for LibriVox.org by Isabella Paul. With a certain aloofness. Admiration. Kenton's arrogant eyes watched the Widdemer pear-tree. His thistle-down-footed sister puts out her tongue at him. Kenton, what do you see? That yonder is only a bare tree. Come, carry Deborah home. She is gossamer light and slim. Oh, mother, but I don't want to, Kenton replies with devotion. I've gathered your stones for the bird. Come on, don't you want to throw 'em? Ah, Kenton, Kenton, my child, who but you would have such an emotion? But in spite of it, I admire you, as you'll see when you read this poem. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Grackle of Grog by Margaret Widdemer, writing as William Rose and Stephen Vincent Benet. Read for LibriVox.org by Ben Hess. They sing arm in arm, Stephen Vincent having rather more to do with the verse and William Rose with the chorus. Their sister Laura is too busy looking for a fairy under the tree to add to the family contribution. The Grackle of Grog. It was old Yale College made me what I am. You oughta heard my mother when I first said damn. I put a pin in sister's chair, and she jumped sky high. I don't know what'll happen when I come to die. But oh, the stars burst wild in a glorious crimson wangle. There was foam on the beer mile deep, mile high, and the pickles were piled like seas. Near his hair was a flapper's bob that turned to a 10-mile tangle. And the forests were crowded with unicorns, and gold elephants charged up trees. Forceps in the dentist's chair, razors in the lather. Lord, the black experience I've had time to gather. But I've thought of one thing that may pull me through. I'm a regular devil, but the devil was too. There were thousands of trees with knot-holed knees that kicked in a league-long rapture. Birds green as a seasick emerald in a million-mile shrieking row. It was $60 or 60 days when the cop had made his capture. But God, the bun was a gorgeous one, and the faculty did not know. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Preenings by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Lola Ridge. Read for LibriVox.org by Yuhan L. Jiang. Lola Ridge, who apparently did not care for the suburbs. Preenings. I preen myself. I always do. My ego expanding encompasses everything, naturally. This bird preens himself. It is our only likeness. Ah, God, I want a ghetto, and a Freud, and an alley, and some immigrants calling names. God, you know how awful it is. Here are trees, and birds, and clouds, and picturesquely neat children across the way on the grass, not doing anything improper. Poor little fools, I mustn't blame them for that. Perhaps they never knew how. But oh, God, take me to the nearest trolley line. This is a country landscape, and I can't stand it. God, take me away. There is no sex here, and no smell. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Tea o' Herbs by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Edna St. Vincent MLeigh. Read for LibriVox.org by Nicole James. Recites in a flippant voice, which occasionally chokes up with irrepressible emotion, and clenching her hands tensely as she notices the grackle has hopped twice. Oh, I have brought in now bergamot, a packet of brown senna, and an iron pot. In my scarlet gown I make all hot. And other men and girls write like me, setting herbs aplenty in their poetry. Bergamot for hair oil, bergamot for tea. And they may do ill now, or they may do well, little should I care now what they have to sell. But what bergamot and rue are, none of them can tell. All above my bitter tea I have set a lid, as my bitter heart by its red gown hid. They write of bergamot because I did. From its padded hangers they've snatched my red gown, men as well as girls, and gone downtown, flaunting my vocabulary, every verb and noun. And the grackle moans high above the pot. He is sick with herbs, and I am not, who have brought in bergamot. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Weaver Bird by Margaret Widdemer, writing as John V. A. Weaver, read for LibriVox.org by Arthur Trinchera. Gosh, kid, that bird a-cheepin' in the tree, all green and cocky, why, it might be me singing to you. Wished I was just a bird bringing you worms. You know things I've heard about me and flowers maybe. Like as not, somebody'd get me with an old slingshot and I'd be dead. Gee, it'd break you up. Nothing would be the same to you, I bet, knowing my grave was out there in the wet. And we two couldn't pet no more. Say, kid, it makes me weep, same as it always did, to think how bad you'd feel. I got a thought, an awful funny one I sorter caught. Nobody never thought that way, I guess. But when I get blue and things is in a mess, I map out all my funeral, the hearses and 19 carriages, and folks with verses saying how great I was and all like that, and wreaths and girls and crepes around their hat, telling the world how bad their hearts was broke, and you just smashed to think I had to croak. I can't stand that bird somehow. Makes me cry. The world will be darn sorry when I die. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Sonnet, Trees Are Not Ships by Margaret Widdemer, writing as David Morton, read for LibriVox.org by Anthony Tinoco, who, being very polite, only thought it. There is no magic in a living tree, and, if they be not seagulls, none in birds. My soul is seasick, and its only words murmur desire for things more like a sea. In this dry landscape here there seems to be no water, merely persons in large herds, who, by their long remarks, their arid girds, come from the Poetry Society. What could be drier, where all things are dry? What boots this bird, this pear-tree spreading wide? Oh, make this bird they all discuss to pie, hew down this tree and shape its planks to ships, send them to sea with these folk nailed inside, that I may have great sonnets on my lips. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. The Grackle is the Loon by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Eleanor Wiley, read for LibriVox.org by Anthony Tinoco, with an air of omitting the tragic and all-important fact. Never believe this bird connotes jade whorls of carbon commonness, nor, as from ordinary throats, sullies his sharp song in ice-strung stress. He is the cold and scornful loon, who, hoping that the sun shall fail, steeps in the silver of the moon his burnished claws, his chiseled tail. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. A Landscape Gets Personal by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Leonora Speyer, read for LibriVox.org by Anthony Tinoco, speaking, notwithstanding, with unshaken poise. Beloved, I cannot bear that bird. He is green with envy of my songs, cheap, cheap. This tree has a furtive look, and the brook says, oh, splash. And the grass, the terrible grass, it waves at me, it is too flirtatious. Beloved, let us leave swiftly. I fear this landscape, it would vamp me. End of poem.
The Symposium Leading Nowhere by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Corinne Roosevelt Robinson, who, having engagements to speak at 10 unveilings and 9 public schools and 12 other symposiums, stayed away but sent this handsome tribute by wire. Read for LibriVox.org by Nicole James. I sing of the joy of small paths, the paths that lead nowhere at all. Though I never have gone on them, nevertheless, they are admirable and so small. I go out at midnight in motors, but Being a Roosevelt, I drive straight ahead on the neatly paved highway, for I wish with much speed to arrive. Oh, the joy and effulgence of small paths, surrounded with birds and with trees. I would love to go down on a small path and sit in communion with these. Oh, grackle, I yearn to be with you. For poetic communion I yearn. But I have 10 engagements to speak in the suburbs, and alas, I've no time to return. Oh, alas, the undone moments, oh, the myriad hours bereft, trying to be 20 people and do things right and left. I would sit down by a small path, and would make me a large rhyme. I should love to find my soul there, but I haven't got the time. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Fowl of a Thousand Flights by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Richley Torrance. Read for LibriVox.org by Lan Kao. Richley Torrance, who felt that the bird did not sufficiently uphold art. The Fowl of a Thousand Flights. Grackle, grackle on your tree, there's something wrong today. In the moonlight, in the quiet evening, you will rise and croak and fly away. Oh, you have sat and listened till you're wild for flight, and that's all right. But you have never criticized a single song, and that's all wrong. Lo, would you add despair unto despair? Do you not care that all these lesser children of the muse shall sing to you exactly as they choose? You are ungrateful, fowl. I wrote a poem once in the middle of August, intending to show 'em that you should not be shot. What saw I then, what heard? Multitudes, multitudes, under the tree they stirred, and with too many a broken note and wheeze, they sang what each did please. And thou, O bird of emeraldine beak and brow, thou sawest it all, and did not even cackle, grackle. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. The Roiling of Henry by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Henry Van Dyke. Read for LibriVox.org by Lan Kao. Henry Van Dyke, who, although for different reasons, did not care for the grackle either. The Roiling of Henry, a song of the grating outdoors. Bird, thou art not a veery, nor yet a yellow-throat, ne'er less I knew thy gentle song, long, long ere I could vote. Thou art not a blue flower, nor e'en a real blue bird, yet there's a moral high and pure in all thy likings heard. Grack, 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 go on and ne'er look back. The noble towers of Princeton hear high thy pensive trill, and eke my ear has heard thee, the while I fished the rill. Thy note rings out at daybreak, before I rise to toil. Thou counsellest persistence, thy song no stone can spoil. Grack, 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 go on and ne'er look back. Yet, bird, there is a limit to all I've undergone. From 5 o'clock till 5 o'clock thou'st chanted o'er my lawn. I cannot get my work done. I give thee, bird, advice. If thou wouldst save thy skin alive, let me not warn thee twice. Grack, 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 go on and ne'er look back. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Pantings by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Kale Young Rice. Read for LibriVox.org by Tom Merritt. Kale Young Rice, who came out rather tired from trying to choose a new suit and could not get it off his mind. Pantings. Pantings, pantings, pantings. Gents' eminent furnishings. On a mystic tide I ride, of the close of a million springs. I take the train for the suburbs, or I sweep from pole to pole. But where is the window that holds them not, gents' furnishings of my soul? Pantings, 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 shirtings and coatings too. How can I think of mere birds, nor blink in the cosmic hullabaloo? The hot world throbs with immenseness, the voidness plunks in the void, and all of it doubtless has something to do with employer and unemployed. Pantings, 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 trousers through all the town, and the tailor's dummies, with iron for tummies, smirk in their blue and brown. I float in a slithering simoon of fevered and surging tents, and my ears are dulled with the mighty throb of the male best dresser's hints. Pantings, pantings, pantings. My wardrobe, they sent it fleet. Ah, the is and the was and the never does, and the cosmos at last complete. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Wild by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Bliss Carman, read for LibriVox.org by Joanna Michael Hoyt. Bliss Carman, who incidentally happened to be correct. The Wild. Oh, spring calls clear a message, the grackle is not green. The mighty Mother Nature, she knows just what I mean. The lilac and the willow, the grass and violet, they are my wild companions where I was raised a pet. The secrets of great nature from childhood I have heard. Oh, I can tell a wild flower swiftly from a wild bird. And Gwendolen and Marna and Myrtle did all three. Among my wildwood sweethearts was much mortality. If they, my loves returning, might gather 'neath these boughs, oh, they would sniff at pear-trees who love the northern sloughs. Their wild eternal whisper would back me up, I ween. This bird is not a grackle. A grackle is not green. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
They See the Birdie by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Grace Hazard and Hilda Conkling, read for LibriVox.org by Ovni. Mrs. Conkling points maternally. Oh, Hilda, see the little bird. If you will watch upon my word, he will come out a very he as like an oboe as can be. He shall be winged with a tail, mayhap a beak him shall not fail. And I will tell him, Birdie, oh, this is my Hilda, you must know. And oh, what joy, if you but knew, she shall make poetry on you. The birdie obliges, whereupon Hilda recites obediently, while her mother, concealing herself completely behind the bird, takes detection. Oh, my lovely mother, that is a bird sitting on a tree. I am a little girl standing on the ground. I see the bird sees me. Bird, color of grass, I love my mother more than I do you. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
A Ballad of the Bird Dance of Pierrette by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Theodosia Garrison. Read for LibriVox.org by Tom Merritt. Theodosia Garrison, who began cheerfully, but reduced her audience to tears, which she surveyed with complacence by the third line. A ballad of the bird dance of Pierrette. Pierrette's mother speaks. Sure is it Pierrette yez are. Pierrette and no other. Och, Pierrette, me heart is broke that ye should be that same. Pretending to be French, and me, your poor old Irish mother that named ye Bridget for your aunt, a decent Dublin name. Ye that was a pious girl, decked out in ruffled collars, with your hair that docked and frizzed, if Father Pat should see, dancing on a piece of grass, all puddle holes and hollers, amusing these queer folk that's called a Pout Society. But it was Bridget Sullivan, her locks flower sprent, that danced beneath the flowering tree, leaping as she went. If there's folk to stare at ye, ye'll dance for all creation. Since you went to settlements, 'tis little else I've heard, letting your good wages go to chat of inspiration, flapping up and down and making out yez are a bird. Sure, if ye got cash for it, 'tis little I'd be saying. Och, Pierrette, stenographing 'tis better wage ye'll get. Sorrow one these long-haired folk has spoke till ye a paying, talking of your art, and ye a lepping in the wet. But it was Bridget Sullivan, her head down bent, went back on the 313, coughing as she went. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. Pierrette remembers an engagement by Margaret Widdemer, writing as William Griffith. Read for LibriVox.org by Tom Merritt. William Griffith, who felt for her. Pierrette remembers an engagement. Pierrette has gone, but it was not exactly that she lied. She said she had to catch a train. "I have a date," she cried. To keep a sudden rendezvous, it came into her mind as quite the quickest way to flee from parties of this kind. She went most softly and most soon, but still she made a stir. For going, she took all the men to town along with her. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Ain't Nature Wonderful by Margaret Widdemer. Writing as Edgar Guest. Read for LibriVox.org by Ryan Godley. Who has an air of absolute belief in the true, the optimistic, and the checkbook. He seems yet a little ill at ease among the others and to be looking about restlessly for Ella Wheeler Wilcox. How dear to me are home and wife, the dear old tree I used to love, the pear it shed on starting life and God's outdoors so bright above. For virtue gets a high reward. Noble is all good scenery. So I will root for virtue hard. For God, for nature, and for me. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Meeting of the Columns by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Don Marquis. Read for LibriVox.org by Tom Merritt. Don Marquis, who, it appears, refers to departments which he and certain of his friends run in New York papers. He swings a theoretical barrel of hooch above his head and chants. The Meeting of the Columns. Chris and Frank and I each had a column. Chris and I were plump and gay, but not so FPA. FPA was solemn. Not so his column. That was full of wit, as good as my column, nearly every bit. We sat on each an office chair and all snapped our scissors. Their things were pretty fair, but all of mine were whizzers. Frank wrote of Cyril, an ungrammatical sinner, but I wrote of drink, and Chris wrote of dinner, and Frank kept getting thinner, and we kept getting plump. Frank sat like a bump, translating from the Latin. Chris wrote of happy homes. I wrote of alcoholic foams, and we still seemed to fatten. Frank wrote of swell parties where he had been. I wrote of whiskey sours, and Chris wrote of gin. But we both got fatter, so the parties didn't matter. Though FPA, he published each as soon as he had been at her. FPA went calling and sang about it sorely. "Pass around the shandygaff," says brave old Morley. FPA played tennis and told the world he did. I bought a stein of beer and tipped up the lid. Frank wrote up all his evenings out till we began to cry, but we drowned our envy in a long, cool rye. And then we got an invitation, Frank and Chris and me, to come and say a poem on a grackle in a tree. But Chris and I had 20 ryes, and we began to cackle. Oh, see the 90 pretty birds, and every one a grackle. A grackle with a hackle, a ticklish one to tackle, a tacklish one to tickle, to ticker, to liquor. And we both began to giggle, and woggle, and wiggle, and we giggled, and we gurgled, and we gargled, and were gay. For we'd had an invitation, just the same as FPA. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Mocking Horse Bird by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Christopher Morley. Read for LibriVox.org by MLeigh. Acting in spite of himself, as if the bird were his long-lost brother, and locating the grackle for poetic purposes in his own home. Good fowl, though I would speak to thee with wonted geniality and Oxford charm in my address, it's not quite easy, I confess. Suavitur in modos hard, when poets trample one's front yard, and this is such an enormous crew that you've got trailing after you. I'd washed my youngest child but for, put the milk bottles out the door, paid my wife's hat bill with no sigh. Ah, happy wife, ah, happy I, tossed down sea essays, then my pen, to be a private citizen, written about that in the Post, when lo, upon the lawn a host of poets sprung upon my sight, each eager for a poem to write. To a less placid bard you'd be a flat domestic tragedy. Bird, grackle, nay, I'd scarcely call you bird, a mere egg you, that's all. Only a bad egg has the nerve to poach a pun on my preserve. To PQS and XYD, both columnists whom you should see, and LMN, a man who never columns a word that isn't clever. and BCD who scintillates much more than most who get his rates. A thing like this would be a trial. It is to me, there's no denial. Why, bird, if they would sing of you, or sin, or broken hearts, or rue, or what young devils they all are, or scarlet dames, or the first star, or South Sea jazz hounds sorrowing, it would be quite another thing. But bird, here they come mousing round on my suburban sacred ground, and see my happiness, it's flat. You wretched bird, they'll sing of that. They'll hymn my happy hearth, and later the joys of my refrigerator. Burst into song about the points of baby's married piece hot joints. The jimmy pipe I often carol, my commutation, my rain barrel, and each uncontroverted fact with which my poetry is packed. In short, base bird, they'll sing like me, and then where will my living be? End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. To a Grackle by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Franklin Pierce Adams. Read for LibriVox.org by MLeigh. Coldly ignoring the roistering of his friends, addresses the grackle with bitterness. Horace, Ode XVIXXVP23. Bird, if you think I do not care to gaze upon your feathered form, rather than converse with some fair, or make my brow with tennis warm, if you should think I'd liefer far hear your sweet song than fast be driving within my costly motor car, and in my handsome home arriving, if you should think I would be gone far sooner than you might expect from off this uncolumnar lawn, bird, you'd be utterly correct. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. Carlo the Gardener by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Thomas Augustine Daly. Read for LibriVox.org by MLeigh. Showing the Italian's love of the beautiful, which he makes his own more than the Anglo-Saxon dreams of doing. The poets they tinka de gada da tree, de gada da arta da birda, but me, I lova da arta, I lova da flower, a bella fioretta, I waita da hour, I moa da grass, I rake up a da leaf, I brava young Carlo, Maria fine teeth, I waita till later. The poets go home, go find a da sup. I creep by this tree and I digga her up. The grackle, the blossom, the tree I love, per Dio and the art, so I give a da shove. I catch a da birda, I get a da tree. I take a to Rosa, my wife, and then she gotta in pada. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Hoboken Grackle and the Hobo by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Vachel Lindsay. Read for LibriVox.org by Tom Merritt. The Hoboken Grackle and the Hobo. An explanation. Bounding on toward the end of the proceedings with a bundle over his shoulder, and making the rest join in at the high spots. The Hoboken Grackle and the Hobo. An explanation. As I went marching, torn-socked, free, with my red heart marching all agog in front of me, and my throbbing heels and my throbbing feet making an impression on the Hoboken street. Then I saw a pear-tree, a fowl, a bird, and the worst sort of noise an Illinoiser ever heard. Banks of poets round that tree, all of the Poetry Society, but me, all a gackle, addressed it as a grackle, showed me its hackle, that proved it was a fly. Tweet, 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 tweet. Gosh, what a packed street. The secretary, president, and treasurer went by. That's not a grackle, said I to all of him, seething with their poetry, iron-tongued, grim. That's an English sparrow on that limb. And they all went home, no more to roam, and I watched their unmade poetry raise up like foam. And I took my bandana again on my stick, and I walked to the grocery and took my pick, and I bought crackers, canned shrimps, corn, codfish like flakes of snow at morn, buns for breakfast, and a fountain pen, laid down change, and marched out again. And I walked through Hoboken, torn-socked, free, with my red heart galumphing all agog in front of me. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Dies Illa, A Bird of a Mask, by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Percy Mackay, Isabel Fisk Conant, and Josephine Preston Peabody. Read for LibriVox.org by Joanna Michael Hoyt. Dies Illa, A Bird of a Mask, being a collaboration by Percy Mackay, Isabel Fisk Conant, and Josephine Preston Peabody. Dramatis Personae: the grackle, who does not appear at all. The spirit of the rejection slip. The spirit of modern poetry. Chorus of elderly ladies who appreciate poetry. Chorus of correspondence, kindergarten, grammar, high school, and college classes in verse writing. Chorus of young men running poetry magazines. Chorus of poetry critics. Chorus of assorted culture hounds. The person responsible for the poetic renaissance in America. The non-poetry writing public, composed of 2 citizens who have never learned to read or write. Semi-choruses of magazine editors and book publishers. Ate, goddess of discord. The Muse. Time, next year. Place, everywhere. Scene, a level stretch of monotony. The spirit of the rejection slip, entering despairingly. Alas, in vain! Yet I have barred the way as best I might, that this great horror fall not on the world. Returned with many thanks, and not because of lack of merit, I have said to 20 million poets, nay, profane it not, that word, to 20 million persons who wasted stamps and typewriting and midnight oil to add unto the world more bunk. In vain, in vain. She sinks down, sobbing. From right and left of stage enter semi-choruses of magazine editors and book publishers, tearing their hair rhythmically. Semi-chorus of editors. We have mailed their poems back to every man and woman, Jack, who weigh the postman down from country and from town. But all in vain, they mail them in again. Semi-chorus of publishers. Though we've sent them flying, we are nearly dying from the books of poetry sent by people unto we. In vain we keep them off our shelves, they go and publish them themselves. Spirit of the rejection slips. All bravely have ye toiled, my masters. Ay, and I've toiled with you, all in vain, in vain. Enter, with a proud consciousness of duty well done, the chorus of correspondence, kindergarten, grammar, high school, and college classes for writing verse. They sing joyously. The day has come that we adore, the day we've all been working for. Now babies in their bassinets, and military school cadets, and chambermaids in each hotel, and folks in slums who cannot spell. Professors, butchers, clergymen, and everyone have grabbed a pen. The day has come, tra-la, tra-lee. Everybody writes poetry. They do a symbolic dance with typewriters, during which enters the chorus of young men who run poetry magazines. These put on horn-rimmed spectacles and chant earnestly as follows. Chorus of young men who run poetry magazines. We're very careful what we put in. This magazine is of highest grade. If it doesn't appeal to our personal taste, there's no use sending it, we're afraid. We don't like Shelley, we don't like Keats, we don't like poets who are tactlessly dead. If you write like us, there will be no fuss. That's the best of verse when the last word's said. Bursting irrepressibly into youthful enthusiasm, and dashing their horn spectacles to the ground. Yale, Yale, Yale! Our poetry! Fine poetry! Nobody else's poetry! Rah, 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 rah! Enter, modestly, the person responsible for the poetic renaissance in America. There are 4 of him, or her, as the case may be. Miss Monroe, Miss Rittenhouse, Mrs. Stork, Mr. Braithwaite. The person stands in a row and recites in unison. I've made poetry what it is today, or at least that's what people say. Earnest-minded effort never can be hid. The others think they did it, but I did. Spirit of the rejection slip, editors and publishers, faintly. You did? They rush out. Person responsible, still modestly. Well, so they say, but I have to go away. I'm due at a lecture I give at 3 today. The person goes out in single file, looking at its watch. As it does so, there enters a pale and disheveled girl in Greek robes. It is the Muse. Muse. In Mount Olympus we have heard a noise and crying as swine that in deep agony are dying. A voice of tomcats wailing, a never-failing thud as of rolling logs, a chattering like frogs. And all this noise unceasing, thunderous, making a horrible fuss, cries out upon my name. Oh, what am I, the Muse and giver of fame, so to be mocked and humbled by this use? I, the Muse! Enter spirit of modern poetry, a lady with bobbed hair, clad lightly in horn glasses and a sex complex. Spirit of modern poetry. You're behind the times, quite narrow. Don't you want culture for the masses? Muse. No, I am a Greek. We never did. Besides, it isn't culture. Chorus of elderly ladies who appreciate poetry, trotting by 2 by 2 on their way to a lecture, pause. Oh, how narrow! Oh, how shocking! She's no Muse. She must be mocking. Muse, sternly, having lost her temper by this time. I am a goddess. Trifle not with me. Elderly ladies, with resolute tolerance. She looks like a pupil of Isadora Duncan, but she says she's a goddess. What folly we'd be sunk in to believe a word she says. She needs broadening, we conjecture. My dear, come with us to Miss Rittenhouse's lecture. Muse, lifting her arms angrily. Ate, my sister! Ate, behind the scenes. I come. Enter from one side band of poets, very large, with lyres and wreaths put on over their regular clothes. From the other side a chorus of poetry critics. At their end steals Ate, goddess of discord, disguised as a critic by means of horn glasses and a cane. The poets do not see her, or anything but themselves, indeed. They sing obliviously. My maiden aunt in Keokuk, she writes free verse like anything. My great-grandmother is in luck, She sold her three-piece work on spring. My mother does poetic plays, my dad does rhymes while signing checks, and my flapper sister, we wouldn't have missed her, she's writing an epic on sin and sex. The world's as perfect as it can be, everybody writes poetry. Chorus of critics, chanting yet more loudly. The world's not quite as perfect as it yet might be, excepting for our brother critics' poetry. The spirit of discord now creeps softly out from among the critics. Rash poets, think what you would do. There's nobody left you can read it to. Poets, aghast. We never thought of that. An audience 'tis flat is our most pressing need to listen to our screed. Each turns to his neighbor. Base scribbler, get thee hence or be my audience. Semi-chorus. We want to write ourselves. We'll not. Semi-chorus. But what you write is merely rot. Hush up and let me read my great eternal screed. Ate, stealthily. Ha, ha. Each poet now draws a fountain pen with a bayonet attached, and kills the poet next him, dying himself immediately from the wound of the poet on the other side. They fall in neat windrows. There are no poets left. Meanwhile, the non-poetry writing public, 2 in number, who have been shooting craps in a corner, rise up at the sound of the fall, take 3 paces to the front, and speak. What's the use of poetry, anyhow? I always say, if you want to say anything, you can say it a lot easier in prose. I never wrote no poetry, and I get along fine in the hardware business. Chorus of critics and culture hounds, thrilled. Ah, a new gospel! Let us write reviews about it. The spirit of the rejection slip, entering and addressing the editors and publishers who follow her. Now I shall pass from you. My task comes to a close. I wing my hallowed way to the fool-killer's paradise, and there for I repose. Editors and publishers. Nay, our great helper, nay. Leave us not yet, our only comforter. We'll need thee still. Folks who write poetry there's naught on earth can kill. During this, the culture hounds, critics, etc., have clustered round the non-poetry writing public, whispering, urging, and pushing. It rises and scratches its head in a flattered way, and finally says, Begosh, I do believe, now that you speak of it, I could do just as good as any of those there fool dead fellers could. The late non-poetry writing public are both immediately invested with lyres and wreaths which they put on over their derby hats. Semi-chorus of editors to spirit of rejection slip. You see, too late. Semi-chorus of publishers. Who shall escape o'ermastering tragic fate? They go off and sob in 2 rows in the corners, while the rest of the mask, except Ate, who looks at them as if she weren't through yet, and the muse, form up to do a dance symbolic of one being born every minute. They sing, The day has come that we adore, the day we've all been working for. The day has come, tra-la, tra-lee. Everybody writes poetry. The muse, unnoticed in the background. Farewell. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
A Tree with a Bird in It, Rhymed Review by Margaret Widdemer, writing as Arthur Geiterman, read for LibriVox.org. He recites with appropriate gestures. It seems that Margaret Widdemer possessed a tree with a bird in it, and being human, prone to err, thought 'twould be pleasant to begin it, or christen it as one might say, by asking poets closely herded to come around and spend the day and sing of what the tree and bird did. Poor girl, when next she takes her pen, some bromide critic's sure to say, Don't dare do serious work again. This stuff is your true métier. No sooner said than done. The bards rush out in quantities surprising, and, overflowing 4 front yards, they carol till the moon is rising. With ardor, or, as some say, pash, in song kind or satirical, asking, apparently, no cash, they make their offerings lyrical. I'd be the first a spear to break for poesy, but this to tackle. It seems a lot of fuss to make about one tree and one small grackle. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. End of A Tree with a Bird in It, a symposium of contemporary American poets on being shown a pear tree on which sat a grackle, by Margaret Widdemer.